everyone, my name is Kim, and we're going to continue talking about the Enneagram types and how they correlate with certain mental health disorders or issues. So we did type 4. Now I'm going to talk about type 5. And type 5, if I remember correctly, is the investigator. So type 5, they are, I'm just going to give you a little bit of an overview of type 5. So the investigators, type 5, they are very knowledgeable. They spend a lot of time reading books or going online to do research on something. And they love doing that. They love expanding on the knowledge that they already have, expanding upon that. They have their own little, inner landscape, or just their own world, where they can be themselves, and, read all the books they want. They are avid readers and avid researchers, whether it's through books or on the internet. They just love accumulating knowledge. That's what gives them that dopamine hit. They enjoy doing that. To be knowledgeable in different areas, it's keeping their mind sharp, and just learning new things. So 5s like to do that. And they can stay in their room all day in their inner landscape and enjoy accumulating more knowledge. I'm going to keep this video short. So type 5s, when they're healthy, they like sharing the knowledge, the things that they've researched with a close friend or a family member. They have no problem doing that. Talking about what they discovered, what it is they're researching. They like to share it with just a small group, family, and maybe 1 or 2 close friends. They are curious individuals, and it's that curiosity that fuels that fire, that enjoyment, the excitement, the curiosity that comes with learning about something, learning about a new theory, learning about a new idea, or coming up with their own ideas and theories. They're that way too. They don't just look up ideas or read about ideas. They have their own ideas, formulating in their minds, ready to talk to, trusted people about these theories and ideas and concepts. So that's how they are when they're healthy. They have that curiosity, that kind of childlike curiosity. How a child is, when they see a stuffed animal, they're just like, their eyes just widen out, and they have this big smile on their face. And so that's how it is with 5s when they are in the inner landscape, just they're daydreamers too. They daydream, about ideas, information, research and concepts, theories. It's all the things that they enjoy, and so they're always in that inner landscape, in their head, or just, their room is their private sanctuary where they can do these things, research, read about something, come up with their own ideas and their own concepts, or coming up with their own theories, so their room it's a sanctuary, but it's like, they're almost like scientists too, the fives, their room is kind of like their lab, where they can experiment, you know, um, you know, they just love learning about new things, you know. They are the type that, they don't they're independent. They don't want to bother their parents or their friends uh, for, to ask them to do something for them. Fives, they, they're known to be independent, and so they don't want to rely too much on people, like, just trusted people, like their family and close friends. They're very independent that way. Okay, so that's a little bit of an overview of type 5. Now we're going to talk about type 5s and how they correlate with social isolation, with depression, and with substance abuse. Okay, so let's start with the social isolation. So when fives become unhealthy, in a way that they don't come out of their rooms, maybe only to eat and go back to their room. They don't spend time with their two close friends. They're hardly around their family. They're just in their rooms. And so this is very isolating. It's not healthy. We are created to connect with people, to be around people. But the fives, when they're unhealthy, they don't want to be around people. They just want to be by themselves and isolate themselves from, from people that care about them, or just not wanting to be around anyone. And that's not healthy. If you isolate yourself, day in and day out, you lose that ability to connect with others, and when a person isolates themselves for a long period of time, it affects their brain. There's no neural pathways forming. When you're with people and you're talking about, interesting, maybe intellectual things, and when a person does that, their brain, new neural pathways start to form, and which is what we want. We want to keep we want to satisfy both sides of the brain's hemisphere, the left and the right. The left hand to do with logic, numbers, or data, facts. Right brain, creativity, intuition, being inspirational. So you know, fives are generally on the left side of their mind. You know, they're logical. You know, the left brain is about, you know, logic, math, being good at math, you know, data, um, stuff like that. And the right brain, which they don't use too much. I mean, they're not really creative. You know, they're very much logical. I forgot to mention that too. They're logical, and it's hard for them to express their feelings. So they're not really using too much of their right hemisphere of their brain that contains creativity, intuition, being an inspiration, you know, that sort of stuff. So yeah, fives, you know, it's not good for them to isolate themselves. Their mind is not going to grow and expand, you know. Okay, so it's just not healthy, you know, to isolate yourself from people. And, you know, they have a problem as it is expressing their feelings, and isolation makes it worse, you know, with regards to trying to express their feelings. Okay, so that's self-isolation. Now, the next thing is depression. Now, if a person, type 5, you know, all that isolation can cause them to have depression, because we are social creatures. We need to connect with people. Even if it's just a few people, we need to connect with them. We need to, you know, we need to talk about interesting ideas or interesting topics that we just find that, you know, very fascinating. And, you know, when we isolate too, and have that depression, we lose that curiosity too. Type 5s, when they have depression, you know, they're not doing research. They're not reading books. They're not doing something, or they're not even connecting with people. So they're not really using their mind, you know. And it, like I said, it's important to keep your mind sharp, you know, to have new neural pathways form in your mind, which is good for your brain to have new neural pathways. That's a good sign that your brain is active. But with type 5s, when they have depression, you know, they're not using their mind so much to do any research, or, you know, or just, you know, they just lose interest in the things they love to do, researching, whether it's online or reading books or talking to their friends about theories that they have or ideas. And so they're just, the depression, a deep slumber, you know, and it's not healthy for them, because the depression leads to self-isolation. So there's a connection there. Okay, I'm going to make this quick here. I'm getting more of my time. Now, addiction. Okay, substance use, addiction. So when they're depressed, when people generally are depressed, they self-medicate, you know, to kind of numb themselves and not feel depressed, you know, kind of numb the feelings and this and that. So substance abuse, okay, so they could start maybe abusing drugs to numb the pain they're going through, the depression they're going through. The drugs just numb themselves. And having that substance abuse, whatever type of drug it is, it wrecks your mind. It does. It destroys parts of your brain, that fives use to get them excited, that dopamine, and the growing of the neural pathways, new ones. Substance abuse, your mind cannot be sharp if you have a substance abuse problem. Drugs kill brain cells, as a lot of people would say. And I don't think it's just marijuana that kills your brain cells. It's any type of drug that you become addicted to kills your brain cells. It affects the area of your brain, the area of brain, when it comes to impulse control, or when it comes to it affects the brain, the dopamine hit, you don't get that. My time is really over. So that is the mental health problems and the low self-esteem that fives live with when they're unhealthy or have a mental illness like depression, or they're dealing with a substance abuse. Okay. I will talk to you guys in the next video, and we'll talk about type 6. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and we're going to say goodbye.